Hello and welcome back to Curiosity Mine. It's been almost a year since we last checked in with the Syntropic forest at Lightning Ridge, so I stopped by to have a chat with Rebel at the Hungry Spirit to see what's changed and what's advanced and what's thrived in the experimental patch of green.
So we're standing here in Syntropic, what we call Syntropic number 1, 4 years after we planted it, essentially, or 4.5 years after we planted it. And one of the big things that we were really nervous about in the management of this system was how many prickly pears we planted. And I think it's the thing that we get the most comments about, and that is the thing that obviously for all the biohazard reasons people are most concerned about. When we planted them, Tiago, our teacher, told us from the experience of Ernst that once the systems got going and the soil improved and the trees all did their job, that those prickly pear would no longer be in the system. And what we saw over the last 4 years is this huge growth. And in the first video that we did together, the prickly pear that was in this section was standing, this high. And now you can see it is not there at all. Not even in, well, there's a little bit of memory left. There's some chopped and dropped remains there of kind of skeletal cactus. And instead what we've got is this beautiful medjool date palm, which again is 4 years old, and river gums that are now, metres tall. Because the pear served its purpose, the soil has improved considerably, and we're really playing in a state of emergence here. So the goal is always, how are you looking after what's coming at the end of the forest's life in succession? For us, this date palm is the end game. We want to have this incredible medjool date palm that's producing dates, probably not for the next 12 to 15 years. But everyone else in the system's job is to get that date palm to its fullest expression. And the role that the pear served was to water and provide nutrient. And we chopped and dropped. So it was building the soil. It's kind of weird because it actually becomes self-replacing. We use the prickly pear to kind of kill itself out. It makes itself redundant with the help of human intervention. And we've seen that throughout the whole of this system, where we planted probably 600 odd prickly pears. Now there's barely a handful left. And that's been both a biological process of us chopping and dropping, and then it just becoming inhospitable in the environment. And also there are some plants that have been taken out by the cochineal or by the cactoblaster, which again is nature just doing a job and saying, you don't need to be in this system anymore. We're going to give you an out and get rid of it out of the system. So for me, that's been the most exciting part of something I was also trepidatious about at the beginning, that I've actually witnessed this through really basic management and understanding of the principles. Now we're seeing those things that are considered bio risks actually being incredibly valuable assets in the growth of a forest. And I think, to me, that's just really exciting.
Part of the process of building a garden like this is understanding the relationships between the various plants that go into it. Some serve different purposes, as we've discussed in earlier videos. Some retain water, some build canopy, some are best suited to grow and be chopped down to create biomass at ground level and help retain moisture and nutrients for the forest. I spoke with Rebel about misconceptions we might have about plant behaviour.
So we've come to another medjool date, and this giant, beautiful old man saltbush, which is in full flower, so we'll be able to get a lot of seed from it. Again, this was planted in September of 2020. This system, we're now in system 2 at the Hungry Spirit. And I love this area for a few different reasons. It teaches us that one of the principles that I was taught as a child, and I think people are indoctrinated with, is that trees and plants steal from each other, that they steal moisture. And certainly when I was out here, all the old farmers are saying, get rid of those big old box trees, they steal moisture from everything else and kill the ground. And it couldn't actually be further from the truth. And I think that this little section of our forest really demonstrates that, where we've got a medjool date that was really tiny seedling when we planted it, growing right in proximity to this casuarina. We've got old man saltbush that's just grown so enormously. We've got wilgas, a couple of different wilgas, the leucaena, and they're all just growing within less than a metre square of each other, and yet they're all thriving in abundance. And so this concept of theft from each other is a human overlay over nature. That's like humans will steal from each other, so we assume that nature does, but actually nature doesn't, and maybe that's the principle by which we should live by, that we're actually all working in harmony together. The saltbush also, a lot of the questions that people ask me about these systems is what plants should we plant? And so for me, the number one priority is biomass in the system, and especially in the semi-arid area where most of the plants are like these casuarinas, tall and skinny and spindly to maximise and optimise water. But the saltbush is different. So if you're planting a system in a semi-arid environment, I would put as much saltbush, old man saltbush, as you can, because we harvest this for biomass. It encourages growth in the system, hormonal activity. You get good leaf, it breaks down really quickly. It loves being chopped, which is why it grows really well for sheep farming in the Western districts, because it just really thrives on being kind of eaten down. And so it really likes that chop and drop environment that works for the Syntropic. And it clearly likes hanging out with other things. It plays well. And so to me, it's one of the number one plants that if you're wanting to build biomass, build soil as a result of biomass, old man saltbush is your go-to.
Curiosity Mine is now on Patreon. Patreon is a service that allows you to directly support your favourite creators to keep making content. If you feel that Curiosity Mine deserves it and you'd like to support my work through Patreon, the link is in the description of this video. If you do, you'll get your name on this list of amazing people. Not that you're not amazing already, but you will be helping me to continue making videos about this kind of thing into the future. At the other end of the Hungry Spirit space is another variation on a syntropic garden. Unlike the main gardens, which were more or less designed and built from scratch using syntropic principles, the garden at the other end has been retrofit to apply the methods of syntropy to a garden with established plants that wasn't designed for the purpose, which has produced interesting results and challenges.
We've been gardening here for nearly 25 years at the Hungry Spirit, and tried everything, lots of different methods, done the permaculture training, we've tried aquaponics, I've tried conventional, I've tried the way that I was taught to grow food by my grandfather. And what has been really amazing about the principles of applying principles of Syntropic in a retrofitted environment, which is what we've done in the garden here behind me. This was my original attempt at a food forest, and it's where I did my jackhammer farming. So essentially just took a new section of ground every year with a jackhammer, dug it up, put potatoes or radishes in to try and break it up, and then would start to try and grow. But this patch was hard work for everybody, the plants included. So then we thought, well, let's retrospectively apply the Syntropic principles. I wanted to do it on the round, so we have got more of a mandala shape here, a circular shape rather than the rose. And it's taken 2 or 3 attempts to get it to any level of proficiency. And so what it's taught me is that you can retrospectively apply the principles of Syntropy. We were doing that with some existing plants, some existing trees, but it still is really what Tiago calls the tree in a hole approach. So where you're basically putting a tree in a hole and hoping that it grows, which is what we had done for very many years. We're still doing that in a retrospective environment really, but maybe with more trees. The best way to apply this, if you can, is to start from scratch, right from the beginning, with everything that you want in the end planted at the same time, all at once in the beginning, which is a more costly exercise because you've obviously got to have the plants, but you can plant seeds, seedlings, saplings, and some more emerged trees if you want to. You don't have to plant them all at the same stage. In fact, it's probably better that you don't. But it's really obvious to me the comparison between the systems where we've been able to do that and these ones where we've done a more retrospective application, that you just get a much better outcome. You get a much better survival rate, you get a better growth, and so I think therefore you're just going to be getting a better outcome in the long term anyway. It's more work at the beginning, but it'll save you time and money and energy down the track. And also the devastation when you lose plants. We planted a lot of trees in these systems behind me in August in 2023, and they came into a relatively hot summer, and because there wasn't enough quality or quantity of life in the soil yet, and also it didn't have all its best friends all together at the same age and stage that you would have in an system begun from the start, started from scratch, we lost a lot of those trees. And so that's kind of heartbreaking for the carers and also the people that have put their time and energy in to plant them. So I think that's the lesson that we've learned, in the last 4 years, is start with the end in mind and plant everything that you want at the end, at the beginning.
I spoke with Rebel about water management and catchment and some of the methods in place at the Hungry Spirit to collect and retain the relatively rare Lightning Ridge rainfall.
When you live in a semi-arid environment with hydrophobic dirt, when it rains, which it does usually in big dumps at one time, the water just rushes off. And so that was a problem for us because even though we're not in a very hilly landscape, we are on the bottom of a ridge. So at the top of this system here, the water just used to sheet right through this area and end up off our property and on the golf course. So we wanted to create an environment that would manage that water better so that we could hold more of it in the landscape. And so we dug a creek bed system in the back here that linked up with an existing dam. And the idea of that was that when there was sheet water, it would flow through the creek bed, that we would plant really heavily along the edge of the creek bed, because that's what you see in other semi-arid parts where they've got dry creek beds but really lush green foliage on either side. The trees are growing. So they've got a job to hold the moisture in the ground as well. We've got lots of biomass that comes up in the summer. It's all self-seeded. So we've got woolly pod vetch, we've got clovers, we've got lucerne, that all they die off over summer and they come back in winter. That feeds the system, and then when we do get rain, we're actually using the biomass of the system, whether it's alive or dead, to hold water in the ground and then also to help move it through the landscape. So you can imagine where we've got tree rows, the water's getting diverted and managed and held, goes around it, goes under it, stays with it. So we're actually using the forest itself, the architecture of the forest, at all levels to manage and move water through the ecosystem and to hold as much of it in the ground and in the trees, because what people forget is that plants are also water tanks. So the trees are actually water pumps for the forest, the grass is, those other plants are. So the more of those we can have, the more likely you are to hold water in a system. And that's really what we're trying to do, demonstrate in this back area, but is also happening across the whole of the place.
So that's the Syntropic garden at the Hungry Spirit in 2024, still going strong and surprising us in new ways. Thank you to everyone who's supported this project on here and in real life, and thank you to Rebel and Tiago for your hard work, and thank you to Michael for maintaining the garden, and thank you to everyone else who has worked on building this magnificent thing with their hands and their hearts at Lightning Ridge. This video was made with the support of the Hungry Spirit at Lightning Ridge, with special thanks to Rebel. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Curiosity Mine on YouTube and maybe even supporting the channel directly via Patreon. The link is in the description. And thank you for watching.